meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile. Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. One of the most well-known maritime disasters in the world is the sinking of the RMS Titanic, which struck an iceberg in deep water and sank in the morning of April 15th of 1912. Many lives were lost that night, and a massive investigation was conducted at the time to find out how such a tragedy could be possible. And that investigation is still going on. And there was a car on board that ship, as well as a man that was in the process of redefining the American automotive industry through his company. Both were lost that night. So today, we're going to take a look at the car and the man that were both sent to their final rest on the Titanic. William Ernest Carter and his family were aboard the Titanic. Carter was from Pennsylvania and born into a wealthy family. The Carters owned several businesses, including coal mining operations and iron and steel production. William was not interested in school or business, dropping out of college to pursue polo playing and hunting. He met a charming young lady at a polo club and Lucy Polk, and the two were married in 1896. A few months after his marriage, he received his inheritance from the family, and it was in the tens of millions. Now filthy rich, he turned to his sporting passions and did not pursue the family business or philanthropic pursuits. They had two children, a daughter and a son, and spent their time touring the world and enjoying all things equestrian. Indeed, in August of 1911, the family went to England on a grand tour of polo, horse racing, and hunting. The family remained there for the next 8 months, finally booking first-class passage back to the USA on board the RMS Titanic. While he was in Britain, he visited the auto dealership of Charles Girot in London. Girot was at the time amongst the biggest independent dealerships in England and specialized in importing high-end luxury and touring cars from the continent. Many of his offerings were French makes, such as Bugatti, Renault, Clermont, and of course Panhard and Levasseur. And so William ordered himself a new car, which was delivered in March of 1912. The car he chose was a 1912 Renault Type CB Coupe de Ville, powered by a 2.6-liter straight-four engine producing about 25 horsepower. This was top of the line from Renault and was designed as a personal limousine for the wealthy. It was not a fast car, top speed being about 35 miles per hour on level ground, but the bodywork sported the ultimate in personal luxury and comfort. Painted a deep red and trimmed inside and out with gold, the car would certainly turn heads as it drove the streets of Pennsylvania. And so, the Carter family boarded the Titanic along with their car, the only private car on the ship's manifest, and sailed for New York. As we know, neither the ship nor the car ever arrived. All of the Carters survived the night and were rescued by the Carpathia. William did file with Lloyd's of London for the value of the car, which was $5,000 at the time, and the claim was paid. Since James Cameron's Titanic movie featured this car, Cameron himself was keen to find it during his expeditions to the wreck. It was stored in the forward hold, and that section is fairly intact, though not particularly accessible. What images of the hold and its contents made by the ROVs are not of great resolution, but with the right imagination, one can claim to see one of the fenders of that car still in the hold. If someday that car could be recovered and restored, it would probably set every record for the most expensive car ever auctioned. At the same time that the Carter family boarded the Titanic, another wealthy traveler also boarded, Washington Roebling II. The Roebling family had been successful American industrialists for generations, and like the Vanderbilts, Clarks, and others, were unthinkably wealthy. The Roeblings owned a number of steel processing factories, and they particularly specialized in steel extrusion. Railroads and steel cables were in high demand, and in the 19th century, and the Roeblings provided them. Indeed, the famous Brooklyn Bridge was designed and built by the family. Washington II was born in 1881 at the family estate in Trenton, New Jersey. But unlike William Carter, Washington pursued his education in business and entered the various family concerns. By 1905, he was well entrenched into the upper management of a family company worth well in excess of $500 million in 1905 money. His business acumen was uncanny, and Washington quickly mastered the science of creating teams. It was around 1907 that young Washington began to show some serious interest in the automotive industry. And that fact did not go unnoticed by his father, uncles, and others. The Roebling businesses were not involved in the auto industry, but if a Roebling wanted to get into it, there were plenty of other Roeblings available to keep the current coffers flowing. So he was encouraged to explore this opportunity, and since money was not something that any Roebling had to be regularly concerned about, he began to look for his way into the car business. That year, he left the family business to join this new venture. He knew William Walter, who was making cars in his facility in nearby Hamilton, New Jersey, and so bought himself a job as his general secretary. Being the kind of business genius that he was, he quickly learned the auto industry and devised his plans to put the Roebling family into the industry in a big way. By 1909, he had bought out his associate and the facilities, which included an abandoned brewery, and began to assemble his team. Several family members, some rich friends with interest, and, of course, someone to actually design the cars. Once designed, there was more than enough muscle on board to get them into production. But what to design? Washington sat down with his friends, Finley Porter, John Cusar, and others. At that time, sports cars were gaining much popularity in Europe, but not as much in the USA. True, there were not many roads in the States at that time where such a car was useful, but that wouldn't change unless America built cars that demanded them. The first car to bear the name Mercer, named after the Mercer County in New Jersey, hit the streets in 1910 and was a solid car, but not the sports car they sought. So, Washington decided to hire the best automotive engineer available to get it done. And the president of the Society of Automotive Engineers would be a good choice. Andrew Riker certainly was. And so in 1911, the first American sports car was unveiled, the Mercer Raceabout. Announced in late 1910, the 1911 Mercer carried a 4.9-liter straight four T-head, putting out some 60 horses when pushed. 4-speed sliding pinion gearbox, low slung for the corners, good ground clearance with detachable rims and spares, making changing a tire quick and easy, could easily cruise at 50 miles an hour for hours, and also hit 80 miles an hour plus when you wanted to, all from America in 1911 for only $24.95. If American roads can't handle cars, then let's show Europe that American cars can handle their roads for half the price of the European sports cars like Mercedes. And so, Washington gathered a team to take the raceabout to Europe and show those Europeans just what an American sports car can do across the pond. Two men accompanied him, his friend and fellow car enthusiast, Stephen Blackwell, and also his chauffeur, Frank Stanley, went to France in January of 1912 to drive all over the place and other places. A grand tour of France and Italy ensued, and the trio made new friends and, in the process, promoted America's sports car to the European elite. And in elite fashion, Washington, at the suggestion of his newfound friends, booked his ride back home on the RMS Titanic. Earlier, I mentioned that there was only one private car on the ship's manifest, so why wasn't the raceabout that they drove all over the continent and Britain not there? Well, the actual driver, Frank Stanley, fell ill a few days before they were all scheduled to leave, and since Washington preferred not to drive the car himself, but rather leave it to the experts, he left both the car and Frank in London so that Frank could recover and then return with the car and drive it back to Mercer. Frank and the car made it home, but Washington did not. He was cut down in his prime, poised to make the USA a force in the sports car world. Instead, he perished, and for many decades, American cars were generally derided in Europe for their lack of maneuverability and sportiness, as they expressed it. How different would the direction of that segment of the U.S. auto industry been had he survived? Hard to say. But there's no doubt that in regards to cars, much was lost that dreadful night on board the Titanic. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.